Davis, no. And he was, had lots of people say that. Oh, there's absolutely no question about it.
All right, Shelley, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. This is the Southwest Vermont Supervisors Board meeting. Thursday, December 19th. It's a few minutes after 7. I believe we are live this evening. The first item on our agenda is public comments. Then we have the draft audit, and I believe I'd like to just, if it's okay, Rick, I'd like to just switch it around to start with the audit.
Sure.
So would you like to introduce our auditor? One of our auditors?
Where's she? Allison? Put you have a seat right there in between Frank and...
Here, flip one over to me, as long as I'm gonna have to listen to this. Criticize it.
Someone said this wasn't online, maybe it wasn't, I don't know.
It is online, I'm sorry, it just referred to
Just not
the draft
highlighted.
communication, required communication, that's the whole thing
Yes, it's a lengthy document.
is there. Right.
Leon is coming down the mountain.
It just
He said if
refers to
Woodford is
this,
open,
which
he'll be
is-
here
Okay.
a
You
little
don't
before 8.
it's
And
just
I
a letter,
don't, maybe
which
Woodford
is
Mountain
the-
is closed since our 2 Woodford people are here. And our other panel rep, do we know where?
Jim
No?
is, Jim's sometimes late though.
Yeah, he was
Yes.
late at my meeting last week. He might come. He said he'd see me tonight.
So while we have a lull, I will just say if we could just introduce ourselves since we are sort of a smaller group today and we're down a few members. So Richard Bump, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'm Richard Bump, I'm the recorder for this group.
Larry Johnson, Shasberry.
Rick Pembroke, CFO of the district.
George Sleeman, Bennington School District.
Ken Surratt, Bennington.
Sean Marie Oler, Mount Anthony.
Catherine McClure, Superintendent of Schools.
Cindy Brownell, Pownell.
Frank Kinney, Shasberry.
Tim Holbrook, Pownell.
Ray Molyneux, North Bennington.
Allison Blessing, manager with the Bonadio Group.
Fred Bonner, Director of Educational Technology, SVSU.
And in the audience, we have both a Bennington, a Banner reporter, a parent, and 2 directors with us this evening, Karen Burnell and Wendy Pierce.
And Jim Connor is coming.
Jim
Connor
is coming down the hall.
Yep.
So would you like to start, Rick or Allison?
Yep, I'll turn it over to Allison, she can give you the lowdown.
Okay. Good evening. You should have 2 documents. One are the financial statements and the related A133 reports, as well as a required communications letter, which is a couple pages long.
Allison, I'm going to interrupt you right off the bat. Just, the A133 report is a required federal piece of the audit because the SU district, and it's different because none of the other districts see this. Mount Anthony may have a couple years ago with some ERA money, but they didn't have an A133 this year, did they? No.
They don't reach that
So
threshold.
when you get more than $500,000, oh, they upped it to $1 million?
Not yet.
Not yet, but they're
They're
gonna up
working on it.
You have to file this report to tell the federal government whether we are a good risk or not, basically.
Okay, so one item you will see that is different if you compared these financial statements to last year's financial statements. Our standards came out with what they call the clarity standards. So our audit reports are now labeled. You will see each paragraph labeled, it has its own heading so that you can, it just better describes exactly what the content is of the independent auditor's report. So the reader understands where the opinion is, what management's responsibility is, what the auditor's responsibilities are. And it's supposed to just help ease the understanding of what the actual audit opinion says on the financial statements. The other change you will see is for the June 30, 2013 year, the supervisory union was required to issue an accounting, or implement an accounting standard known as GASB Statement Number 63. Now, basically, the only impact you're going to see to your financial statements for June 30, 2013 is what you would have seen last year as your statement of net assets is now referred to as your statement of net position. So it really was a terminology change. So you will see that throughout your financial statements and your footnotes. Okay. Now, with respect to, on the table of contents, you're going to see our independent auditor's report, followed by the management's discussion and analysis, followed by all of your financial statements and related footnotes. Then there's another required supplementary information, which is your budget to actual comparison for your general fund and certain other governmental funds. And then you're going to see all of the required reports related to the Circular A-133, which is that federal single audit that Rick was mentioning. So there are a couple standard reports that we are required to issue. There is a schedule of expenditures of federal awards, which lists out all of the supervisory union's federal awards that you expended in the fiscal year ended June 30, 2013. And if there were any prior audit findings, there's a required schedule that we are required to report, and then there's a schedule of findings and question costs, which is on page 39 and 40, which actually, if you can go to that page, I will actually go through that. What this really is it's a summary of everything that's in the reporting package. So we'll go through the summary first, and then I'll go through some other things in a little bit of detail. So on page 39, you'll see in section 1, the summary of the auditor's results indicates that your independent auditor's report that we issued on your financial statements is an unmodified opinion. Now, that's a new terminology as well. Last year, you would have seen it as unqualified. It means the same exact thing. It's the highest level of assurance that we can issue on your financial statements. We are also required to issue a report on your internal controls over financial reporting and compliance and other matters. And we are required to report whether there were any material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or any non-compliance that were material to my financial statements. We did not note any of those. With respect to your federal awards, we are required to issue a report on the internal control over compliance and over your compliance over each major program that was selected to be tested. And once again, we are required to report any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies with respect to those major programs, and we did not note any. So therefore, the type of opinion that you received on your independent auditor's report with respect to your compliance over your major programs was unmodified. And as you'll see towards the bottom, the major program that was selected for June 30, 2013 was your Title I program. And the supervisory union qualifies as a low-risk auditee. There are certain criteria that we have to go through to determine whether you meet that assessment or not, and you do. On page 40, you'll see Section 2 and Section 3, which relate to any financial statement findings or federal award findings and question costs that we would be required to report, and as you can see, there were no instances of either type of finding. Okay. Now, if I can ask you to go back to page 1 and 2. This is our independent auditor's report over your financial statements. And as you can see, each of the paragraphs are titled so that you understand what management's responsibility is, what the auditor's responsibility is, and at the top of page 2, it is our opinion on your financial statements. And just to paraphrase, it says that the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position and the respective changes in financial position of the supervisory union as of June 30, 2013, in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Okay, so that is the highest level of assurance that we can provide on your financial statements. Okay. Now, pages 3 through 12 are the management's discussion and analysis. I'm not going to go through that in detail, but it is very good for you to read. It gives you financial highlights, budget highlights. If were significant variances between the prior year and the current year, those are explained. And it also kind of gives you future factors to think about that could possibly impact the supervisory union in the future. On page 13, this is your statement of net position. This is what was known as the statement of net assets last year. So you have your total assets of $2,635,000, less your total liabilities of $2,204,000 to come down to a net position of $430,000 as of June 30, 2013. Of that $430,000, approximately $89,000 of that is considered unrestricted. Now, this statement is also on a full accrual basis. So this reflects your fixed assets. It reflects any long-term debt, which in this instance is compensated absences. So those items are included in this statement, but they're not included in your regular fund financial statements, which we will talk about in a minute. On page 14, your statement of activities. Once again, this is the consolidated picture of the entire supervisory union for all your funds consolidated together. Your expenses totaled approximately $23 million, and your charges for services, operating grants, and total general revenue approximated $22,400,000 for a change in net position of negative $617,000 for the year ended June 30, 2013. So you can see that you began the year with a net position of a little over $1 million, and you ended it with the $430,000 that was reflected on the prior page. Okay. Now, pages 15 and 16 are the fund financial statements. So this is where you're going to see your general fund, and you're going to see some of the more significant grant funds, and then a column for your other non-major governmental funds. So in the far left column, you're going to see your general fund, and you have the total assets of $1.6 million, less your total liabilities of approximately $1.3 million to come down to a total fund balance of $268,592 as of June 30, 2013. Of that $268,000, you have appropriated for the subsequent year's expenditures approximately $137,000, leaving you with unassigned fund balance of $131,000.
Does anyone have any questions as she's going through it?
Okay. On page 16, this is going to show you your statement of revenues and expenditures and changes in your fund balance for your governmental funds. So you'll see, focusing on the general fund, your total revenues were $3,135,000. Your total expenditures were approximately $3,500,000 for a deficiency of revenues over expenditures of approximately $352,000. So for the beginning of the year, you had started with a $620,800 fund balance, and you ended the year with the $268,592 fund balance.
It's still in the black.
So far.
Agree?
What's that implying?
Okay, so pages 19 through, let me just see here. I'm trying to find it. 30 are your financial statement footnotes. So they give you a better description of certain line items that are presented in your financial statements. It discusses the overall entity, the basis of presentation of the financial statements, and things of that nature. So they definitely are worth reading. Actually, on the very last couple pages of that, pages 29 and 30, there's a footnote 10 that just gives you a summary of accounting pronouncements that are issued but have not yet been implemented by the supervisory union. And that's sheerly because they just are not required yet. Some of them, you could early implement them, but it's not a requirement. So those are just summaries of some of the things that are up and coming that you could see changes to your financial statements in future years as a result of these accounting standards that are out there. Okay. On page 31, this is your schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. This is your budget to actual comparison. Okay, so just focusing on the general fund, you'll see your original budget and then your final budget, and then your actual column, and then the variable or the variance column with a favorable or unfavorable variance. Okay, so as you can see in your original budget, third line from the bottom, you budgeted to utilize $483,386 of fund balance for the June 30, 2013 year end. If you go over to the actual column, you actually only utilized $352,212. So you actually had a favorable variance of $131,000. So you used less fund balance than you had originally anticipated using. Okay?
A question? I'm still stuck on page 16.
Okay.
And it's just, I'm the newest guy here. I don't understand, total revenue at 22 million. I don't understand, the federal aid, the school district assessment and the federal aid. I would think that should be subtracted. I'm obviously wrong, but is that really 22 million revenue? Don't we?
It is. Your federal aid represents the amount of grant awards that the supervisory union receives and utilizes for a wide variety of different programs, special education, things of that nature.
So at special ed, there's about, the district assessment is about 9 million. And then there's another 8 million federal?
Well,
Is that a net number? I'm really confused.
it's understandable because it's confusing. The SPED reimbursement state aid, even though the expenses are here, the revenue flows through to the member districts. You see that in Pownell. You saw that in Pownell's audit. You saw that your SPED revenue was significantly higher than was planned. What you're seeing here for federal aid are all the title grants. Or I shouldn't say all title, but all the grants. And when we talk about, the grants being reduced and having to shift into local dollars or into the general fund, that's what we're talking about coming out of here. This is Title I, Title 2A, there's IDAB grant in here, there's Medicaid in here.
I guess my one question I don't understand, the school district assessments, which way is that money going, in or out to the school district?
That's coming to us, that's, the SU bills the member districts, that's revenue into the
So
SU.
Pownell's paying, that's what Pownell and Chatsworth are paying you.
Yeah,
We'll talk this.
no problem.
This is your original.
And then there's, just so you stay on there, then we got some state aid that off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly what was, but then you've got the federal aid, some interest income. There's $400,000, what they're calling sales, which is,
They're
probably largely associated with their after-school fees and stuff that
Right.
are coming in
Right.
to that program, that's participation fees. Sales is probably not a good title for it, but that's largely what that number is. And then I'm not sure what's that big number in the other was. Do you remember, Allison, what drove that number?
not off the top of my head, but I know there's various grants. Some of it, actually, a lot of it is
I know-
local match,
No,
like
I-
local
I
type
know
things as well.
I know what it is. Those are probably largely the VCPC grants, those types of grants that we got in. That's where that money would come in.
Right, it's like a local,
Competitive grants and, yeah. Does that help, Jim?
Somewhat. I think we'll look at it closer.
Just Stop in anytime and I'll help you.
That's okay.
What page are we back on now?
I am going to, if nobody has any other questions about the financial statements, I'm going to go into, on page 32, I'm going to start talking about the single audit reports. Okay, so on pages 32 and 33, this is our independent auditor's report on your internal controls over your financial reporting and compliance and other matters. This is a required report in accordance with government auditing standards. And on page 32, and at the very last, that paragraph, almost the second to last sentence, it basically says, during our audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we consider to be material weaknesses. We also did not identify any significant deficiencies as well. Otherwise, they would be reported in this report, and they would be reflected in that schedule of findings and question costs that we reviewed first. Okay. Same with on page 33, the last sentence of the first paragraph says the results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported. Okay. So pages 34 and 35 are the independent auditor's report on compliance for each major federal program. So with respect to, when you're reading this report, with respect to each major federal program, the only program that was tested was your Title I program for 2013. Okay, so our opinion on page 35, our opinion on each major federal program, in our opinion, the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to above. They could have a direct and material effect on each of the major federal programs for the year ended. Okay. Okay, so on page 36, this is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So these were all of the federal grants that were received and expended through the supervisory union for the year ended June 30, 2013. So you'll see that there are different grants from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Justice, Education, Health and Human Services. So these are all the grants that you see. Okay. And that is actually all I have. If anyone has any questions with respect to the single audit or any other financial statement questions?
So, I brought this up at MAU last night, and it's just a sort of an overview in that our management, our financial and management team, or the CFO, meet with the accounting group, and they go over areas they'd like them, right, to pay more attention to, or what might have been different in this past year than any other year?
Key management staff, as part of the audit, is required to be interviewed, and they call it the Arthur Anderson questions, as I recall. And they basically, it's I'm under penalty of perjury. Catherine, is under penalty of perjury, that we have to identify what we think are potential issues. I think that's the question.
Right, areas of...
Or
And,
any suspected fraud or...
yeah, if our receptionist starts driving, not that she would have any access to money, but I'm using that as an example. She starts driving a Bentley to work,
And she hadn't won the lottery.
She hadn't won the lottery on Tuesday, then, we're basically required to say, Mrs. Jones is driving an awful expensive car that, based on our best knowledge of her income, seems suspicious. I don't think I've ever said that about anybody. Actually, I haven't seen anything very elaborate in our parking lot.
Nor have I.
That's just one example. And there's a litany of questions that we typically have to go through. And then they give us the all-encompassing other question. Well, what else should we know that we haven't asked you that you should tell us about that is possibly going on out there? So I think that's what you were looking for.
And then I think, in previous times, I remember Alan saying to various boards that they do these spot checks to check that the signatures for something are there, or the board sign the warrants or
They
that
check the minutes.
that the minutes reflect that the warrants were accepted, or if there's an off contract that it wasn't just signed by the board chair, it was then voted on. I mean, so I just, because we had a year where we had assessments transferred in at the end of the year, I just wanted to reassure everybody that these things are looked at with every year in the accounting, so.
Yeah, and the spot checks you're talking about, they literally go through our checkbook. And they tell us, we want that check, and all the supporting documentation that goes with it. And they, we have no determination of what they look at. They just pick however they choose to pick them. And we just have to pull it all together. That's why you see all those boxes downstairs. If you ever go downstairs, and you see all those boxes lined up, that's all the backup we had to pull for various questions.
Vote a room, the auditor's room,
Yes.
for a period of months.
So, and I'd also just like to close with, we have no, what I would call dings, and, 8, 10 years ago, there were deficiencies that have been corrected over the years, and there were none at MAU, and there are none here. I confess I didn't look at the other audits, but I think that in
They're all
large
pretty
part
nice.
is the staff in the financial department does an excellent job with our financial matters, so.
Sean Marie,
Oh.
excuse me.
George or Ken,
It's not a question for Allison, but for the board.
what page are you on?
I'm on page 12. I would think that at some point, rather than shelving this report, that the supervisory might want to spend some time at some future meeting talking about the factors bearing on the future of the supervisory union. I mean, there's some of these items that we really should be looking at and digging into, and not just putting this thing aside.
Are you talking about the long-term liabilities?
I'm talking on page 12, factors bearing on the
Bottom half of
future.
page 12.
Bullets.
Oh, okay.
11 bullets.
Issues
Factors
that would
bearing.
be identified that might have an impact.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We should,
We can put it under a financial piece on or another retreat type, an information. Ken, did you have a question?
No, it's the same thing.
There'll actually be some that will be covered in budget development, and as we move in to the next year, we can go through the whole list. Sure.
So thank you, and would we like to approve this month,
Please.
the draft? If there's no other questions, can we have a motion?
I'll move
to-
it.
Second.
That would be Fran and Cindy moving to accept the audit for FY '13. Any other questions? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing
Thank
such
you.
a wonderful
Thank you very
job.
much.
Allison,
Thank
do
you
you
to Rick
travel
and his
from New
and his
York? It
group.
hasn't started snowing yet.
Yes, I did.
Rain.
I have my big SUV, so I'm good.
You're not driving that Bentley, are you?
No.
Why is the fans on? Why is the fans on?
Thank you for
Thank you very
coming.
much.
I appreciate it.
Happy holidays to everyone.
Okay, guys, side conversations here. We're going to move on to the SVSU budget, but first we will have public comments. Lori, do you have a public comment, or is there anyone else in the audience?
I actually have a couple. One of them being with the upcoming budget. I have concerns about, we do have plans to put in place several individuals to assist in the special education department, and I am concerned that without the community supporting the budget, that what we have planned to support all students, not just those with special needs, might not come to fulfillment, and that's a very big concern of mine because of the difficulties that we experienced trying to put the BSD budget
Okay, so the
before.
first one is the concern of the budget passing.
the budget passing.
Okay, and the
And the
next?
other one, which I've been discussing with Ms. McClure, but it's regarding a contractual obligation, and I'm not sure if it should be brought up in public session or if it needs to go to executive session
So
after.
is it something about you personally?
Yes, it is.
So then, no, that's not something appropriate for this
Right.
board. right? I mean, in
No,
open
I'm
session.
sorry, it is, because
No,
it's...
in open session, it's not
Right, but
appropriate.
in executive session,
I
if I
I
could.
just reviewed it with
So if you'd like to write me a letter, and
No, I don't. I really need the board to know about it, because this is just, I've been talking with the SVSU, and unfortunately, it's come to the point where it is that I need to make sure that this is the path that the board wants to take, because I'm finding that despite my efforts to reconcile the situation, it's just not forthcoming, and I'm very concerned about it because it's impacting me. And I know that Catherine did approach me before the meeting, and unfortunately, that's in resolution of part of this problem, but it is not the complete resolution, and I just really need to know that this is the way the board feels about it.
well, since we don't really know what it is, I'm not sure we could actually,
Well, that's why I'm requesting executive session with the board.
Is that necessary this month?
it's actually, it's not warned on our agenda, so let's see what time it is at the end of this, when we get through the agenda, and if we don't get to it, then it will be, we'll be having an extra meeting between now and the next, no, we'll be having another one on.
We might not.
It depends on how we move through this agenda, so.
I would just say that I'm certain that I can work to resolve it. It's the timing of it that's of concern, partly, to Mrs. Mulhern.
Okay.
But
So
I
we'll
can
see-
work with finance and we
Well,
can
we
figure
can
it
see
out.
where we are at the end of this meeting. Is there something else?
No, that was it.
Okay, thank you.
Summary.
Yes.
I should have brought this up last night, MAU, but I forgot to. You were going to come back to say how many MAU seats were up and who's running. So I'm just... if
Well,
you-
I don't know who's running. I mean, I can't,
Okay.
that I can't know, but I can tell you there's 2 MAU Bennington seats that are open for, there's the Shaftesbury seat that is open. There's the North, oh, you mean for the whole SU or you want MAU?
No, just MAU. I should have done
Okay,
it there,
so
but I
there's
forgot
North
to.
Bennington, 2 Bennington seats, a Shaftesbury seat, and a 1-year Woodford seat because Peter.
Peter Frank, okay.
Franz resigned last night, and he's got 1 year, there's 1 year left on that term through June or March of 2015. So Avis finds in Woodford, somebody up there in Woodford for the.
And the
I mean,
petitions have to be in at what date?
January 27th at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And
That's so people know that
I
we're
will,
watching.
actually, Tim Corcoran and I disagree on this, but you may recall when Mike Bethel challenged the MAU makeup, that Steve Stitzel and Armando and Mark Ottinger were all involved, and what the Supreme Court ruling was back in the, I don't remember what year, the residents nominate the person from their town. So while Tim Corcoran and Cassie will tell you that anybody can sign the petition, which has always been the case, our agreement from the Supreme Court said that you must be nominated from your town and voted on at large, which was part of the agreement. But I'm just putting that out there because when I've gotten signatures in the past, I always made sure they were from Bennington, so there was never any question. So that's just a side note, but Tim and Cassie will tell you that anybody who can vote on that ballot can sign your petition, which is what makes sense.
Okay.
So I hope I answered that fully.
That's all I
And
had.
Karen, did you have a question?
I have an announcement.
Oh,
Is that okay?
yes.
We found out this morning, you probably have already heard, that Vermont was awarded $36.9 million for the Early Learning Challenge Grant.
Yahoo!
So that's very exciting, and we expect some very positive impact in our area that I can't go into detail yet about, but $36.9 million over the next 4 years, so one of six states.
Thank you,
So-
Karen and Wendy and Danielle, and they really did help Ally Richards, who put the grant together upstate, who worked through the governor's office, and I did hear about it earlier today, but I didn't want to steal your thunder.
Well, and Donna McKenzie also was part of, the parts that we wrote were around, or helped with, or read, or, responded to where the pre-K to grade 3 continuum, which we're most excited about, so.
It is very exciting. That's a lot of money over 5 years. Larry?
That's a statewide thing, right?
Yes. But our early ed folks had a lot of, I would say a fair amount of input, because our pre-K program has been so successful down here. They did tap their knowledge both down here and upstate.
One further note, I'd like to put a plug in for our supervisory, or our board. That they have some excellent material available for any candidates that are considering it. And
The VSBA.
yes, and thank you for that. And it's available online, or you can get hard copies of it, and I believe it's free.
It is. And I believe there was a webinar, so the webinar that was done on, if you're thinking of running and you want to run, and I really encourage people to get out and run. We typically don't have races. We have a lot of seats around the state. We have 36 board members down here in the supervisory unit, maybe more, or 36 seats held by multiple, some have multiple seats.
Fran has 3 of them.
Anyway, Tim Holbrook has come to join us to help with the SVSU budget presentation. And if we have no other comments, Frank, are we looking ahead? Are we looking to the
We're gonna wait just a second and then we'll go
Yeah.
into,
Okay.
if that's all right.
Tim, it's all you and whoever.
All right. I see, looking around the table, that most of the people at this meeting have been through the whole process that we have spent considerable amount of time on. That was the SVSU Finance Committee working on a budget. But I do think, in case other people may be interested in it, or 1 or 2 people may not have picked up the full facts, that it's an interesting process. And I must say, it's the first time that I've been involved with the SVSU budget. I've been involved with budgets for a long time, but it was very interesting, and I thought that the comments by the people at the meeting were very appropriate. They ranged everywhere from making us all well aware of the accelerating cost and involvement in the special education whole area. They were involved in making it apparent that there are real concerns about where that program is going to go and what it means in terms of the finances of the district, as well as comments about how we might better utilize the staff and things that we have. So basically, what I think the 2 points that we've talked about, and I'd like to emphasize again, that the SVSU budget is divided into 2 sections. One is the general proportional assessment, and that proportional assessment really has to do with the amount of money that's divided among the different districts on a proportional basis on those services that the SVSU central office basically supplies. And it was a bit of a challenge this year because of North Bennington's status change. And the central office worked hard to come up with a formula that would share those expenses in a proportional way that made sense. The other section of the SVSU assessment comes from the direct assessment, and that means that those districts that are hiring special education teachers, paras and the rest of it, are part of the SVSU budget. They are part of the SVSU budget, and therefore those expenses are incorporated into the individual districts. So just a couple points on those 2 areas. The general proportional assessment really is down about a little over 4.5%. The increase in the budget for the assessment mainly comes from the direct assessment, and that is simply an area that is controlled by the individual school boards. The individual school boards determine what that assessment's going to be by the number of staff that they hire. Now, the total budget for the SVSU that will go out will be an increase of about 4.5%, a little bit more than 4.5%. that will be shared by the different districts. That figure can be adjusted depending upon how the individual boards address the issue of how many special education teachers they want to hire in their district. So if we go to a district, doesn't make any difference which one, and they add people, it's going to increase that number in terms of the percentage of increase. If they eliminate a few positions, it's going to decrease it. The other big issue that one of the other big issues that we discussed was the necessity that was brought very clearly to our attention by a number of state reports, that we really need to do a better job in organizing and determining how effective our special education programs are. Both Wendy and Karen have worked hard to do the best job they possibly can, but it became obvious that we did not have the supervision that was needed to ensure that we were doing things as we should do them, and that we were carrying through with a number of different things that were pointed out to us that we're not doing. For instance, we're not really doing as good a job with the IEPs as we should. We're not doing as good a job with communicating to the parents as we should. And we're not doing a good enough job of supervising the individual teachers and to be sure that we're utilizing their time as best we can. We're going to go into more details of what we want to do with some of these things, as I know that the business office has a presentation. But I would just like to close by saying that I am very confident that the process that was gone through with the consideration of what is best for kids, as well as what the economic reality of the community. And we've got to face those two issues as we go through the budgetary times. But I'd just like to emphasize again that the control of costs for SVSU, in the major portion of it, falls on the individual boards in what they believe is the best program that they can institute within their district, because it will have it, if those costs go up, then the assessment will go up. Rick, I think that's about it, unless there's something else.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my cohorts to the table here, because they don't
There's a chair here as well.
So what can happen is that,
Karen, do you want to come up here? Wendy, you want to take that one?
I don't want you in the back.
I'm sorry,
The
Sean?
head of the table, Karen.
I can pull it here.
You want to ask a question, Sean?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sean Marie?
Yeah.
Do you want to ask a question?
No.
I'll wait till my next. Okay.
So, I'm glad that Frank got that working, because I'm having difficulty getting my computer going, so hopefully I can make this work. I've passed out the detail budget, line-by-line budget. I'll be perfectly honest with you, based on the changing of the assessment streams that we created, it'll be very difficult to follow that from this year to next year, because we moved a lot of items back and forth to align that new assessment stream to accommodate all the changes that were made in it. When I go through this, I'm going to give you, there's a couple of areas that I've brought together so that you can see some of those changes. If it's an item that is looking forward, it is broken out into the new assessment streams. If it is a slide that is a comparison to this year or previous years, I've had to combine some of those assessment streams so it makes a logical sense to you, and I apologize. It's the necessary evil that we have to go through to make this transition over for the assessments. But please don't hesitate to ask questions, because I think we did a good job in making it as clean as possible, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions in the end. One thing that was really centered when we were going through this budget, as Tim talked about, you know, the students were at the forefront of our thought process. We're focusing on the high quality of education. You'll see that with the new purchase of some math curriculum that we've been able to creatively finance, and there's very little, as there's only $20,000 in this year's budget for a purchase that's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $210,000. We're able to leverage some money this year and some various grant monies to make that happen. And then the other thing that we're largely focusing on is the seamless relationships that take place from early education, preschool, to the elementaries right up through. And when I say we, I largely mean the directors. All I do is account for this money. I don't spend it, I just account for it. So this is largely your directors' budgets going forward. This is related to the new assessment streams. It's a similar pie chart that you've seen before. I apologize, at least for me, that's blurry. I don't know if it's helps anybody else, if anybody else can see it. But, you know, it's no surprise, we've known this for a number of years. Special ed is, you know, the biggest portion of our budget, even though it is just as some have said that it's just an accounting, we handle the money twice, it's really the local dollars. That's what Tim is largely talking about as far as their direct assessments, is that 70% special ed services that the local districts have determination over. Wendy works with the principals and that staff to determine how to best serve the needs of those students. And this is just a little teaser. When we get to the end, I'll show you how the net cost of this to the districts is only 1.76%. So store that in the back of your head, and I'll show you how we get there when I get to the end.
Rick, excuse me, can you
Now
go back?
you're going to challenge my technology and see if I go back.
No, you don't need to go back.
You just need to go back in the question, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you don't have to. On that 70% special ed,
Yeah.
does that take into account what we get back from the state, and that's why you come up with the 1 point something?
That does not account, but I do account for it later to come to the 1.7.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's
All
kind
right.
of yes, kind of no.
All right,
It's not, it's, the revenue's not in the pie chart, that's strictly the expenses,
I got you.
but it is in the banner to get to the 1.7.
All right,
But that 1.7 is our money. I
yes,
mean, it's just coming out of a different pocket, but it is our money. It's money that we give to the state that they give back to us, but we're paying for it.
So, this is just a simple picture, and I've been apologizing to Wendy for a couple months now that I'm picking on her in special education, but unfortunately, it is the nature of the services that we deliver. You can see that majority of our increases are in the special ed area. Technology is down 62,000. Early childhood is relatively flat, down a minor amount. Administration is up 120,000, and finance is down a small number, $40,000.
So where's the curriculum?
Curriculum, thank you. This is a good example, because it was referencing back to the previous year. This is an example where I combined admin, curriculum, and HR into that number together. Because if I was to show curriculum by itself, with that shift that we made for the assessments, it would show like a 4,000% increase in curriculum alone, which isn't accurate because a lot of it was just shifted out of admin into curriculum. Yes, sir.
Special ed, technical, ECP, and finance.
Early childhood.
Early child, I couldn't.
Early childhood.
Focusing. Is that all rolled in? Are the director levels and above rolled into the admin? Are they considered admin?
No, they're rolled into the special ed services.
And it's like the tech, so the management of tech and your salary is not administration?
No, I'm all in finance, Frank is all in tech, admin is in admin.
So
Admin is really superintendent's office. Might be a better way for you to understand it.
But,
It is a better way.
but in the future, it'll,
Spread it.
you will be able to compare this year to next year in different admin curriculum, HR, right, as it goes forward.
Yes.
Could I make a suggestion that maybe next year you can make this print a little bit bigger?
But on the paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a letter to hand you tonight about that.
I'll give you a magnifying glass.
We'll buy you another pair of glasses.
So this is a short picture of what Tim was talking about. The red block represents the proportional assessments, or proportional expenses, proportional expenses. They're down 4.62%. Direct expenses, which is significantly largely special ed, and the new direct assessment now, which is the audits, which is a total of 49,000, which is a decimal point in this transaction. Those are in the blue. The green line you see going across there, I should have brought my laser pointer. The green line you see going across there is the, oh, there is one on here?
I'll have to show you.
That's the total budget combined. Any questions on this one? So now we'll talk a little bit about some of the highlights in each of the departments.
So, Donna Leap is not available to come tonight, so I'll be talking about the curriculum area. We have had an increasing number of students who are considered English language learners, so we need to, they used to be called second language learners. So we need to increase our ELL instruction, so we've increased one of the teaching positions from a 0.5 to a 0.6. And that is to accommodate for the additional students. We are, as you know, in our third year of implementation of Common Core standards. We know that the standards around mathematics are more rigorous, and our curriculum is in need of resources in order to provide materials and software for teachers to address the aligned curriculum with Common Core. And we are also making sure that we are giving attention to the professional development that teachers need in the area of technology. So those are some highlights of the increases in those areas. I think Rick in the introduction mentioned that we're looking at a lease purchase agreement with the mathematics materials using some resources from this year, so we only have a $20,000 increase for the actual resources in mathematics.
Catherine?
Yes.
If I may, what are the primary languages for the English language learners?
Spanish for our newer rise in population, and typically it's Spanish and Chinese. We have had
Chinese.
occasionally families with Japanese and Russian, but mostly Chinese and Spanish.
The technology, first thing there is the upgrading hardware and software infrastructure. Support additional devices in the buildings. This is the servers and switches and routers and firewall and stuff that's running the overall network. There's an increase in broadband capacity. It's bumping up from 30 to 50 megabits per second in many of the outlying buildings, bumping up to 100 in several buildings. And in general, everything is going up to accommodate more streaming videos, streaming podcasts, and other things that teachers are using, visiting museums online, etc., stuff like that.
There's going to be 350, a little bit more actually than 350 devices coming in for to move towards the one-to-one scenario that's in the technology plan in various buildings across the SVSU, and increasing the virtual environment, which will aid us in delivering the SBAC test more readily, and also accommodate as people are bringing their own devices into schools will help us to manage that. Any questions on any of that?
Ken?
Who'll be getting those 350 devices?
Well, some would be in the BSD, some would be.
I thought that was in our budget already.
Yeah, this is really to support of all that.
To support them, Ken, the overall, yeah.
So this is the support of the technology.
Yeah, the local districts will be buying that machinery.
Right.
This is a support of all that.
Any other questions for Frank?
With the administration, you'll remember that we are establishing the Human Resources Director. In that case, we are moving from a management orientation of personnel matters to an employee resource orientation, where we can expand employee services, and that will include recruitment and succession planning, as well as utilizing more of our capacity electronically to provide employees direct access to their records beyond payroll and leave reports. Their professional development can be put on this software, so we're really looking to expand that as well. And I've previously spoken about the other advantages of that.
Ken?
Is that the bottom on their electronic, is that getting that person last year they cut out of the budget? That was going to be,
The Medicaid person?
no, transferring all the records, no?
No, we did not add that
No,
this year.
this is just, we believe with the increase in the HR staff that we'll be able to more effectively utilize the software we have to generate and maintain those electronic files. We still haven't solved the backlog of
Right.
a room significantly sized with documents that go back to 19 whatever.
But the increase in the staff is only the new director, right?
Right.
Well, it's the second half of the director that was previously reduced.
So as you can see, the top line represents the special education students, 3 through 22. As you can see, it's been relatively stable over the last several years. The bottom line represents our special education staff, which has been declining. That's been declining due to a number of items that are occurring at the SU. We've been working on our efficiency staffing, making sure that we're providing the staff that are needed for the students' needs. And we've also, in FY15, the projected, one of the projected decreases is that we're adding some associate directors, and we're looking for those associate directors to evaluate and determine the needs of the paras and teachers that we have in the buildings. The final reason for some of the decline is that when North Bennington went to an independent school, those staff, special education staff, are no longer part of the SU staff, but we keep the children on our child count. So our child count, which is done in December and in June, those numbers remain, the North Bennington students remain on those child count numbers.
And will they continue to do so?
They will continue to do so.
Tim?
Wendy, with the declining population of the schools and the number of students requiring or that have IEPs, is that percentage, I can't do it because I can't remember what it is that percentage going up considerably, the number of kids within the schools that have IEPs, the percentage, not the numbers?
We're at about 19% special education population. It has gone up a little bit as the regular education numbers have decreased a little, but we're looking at those numbers and trying to determine what items that we need to work on to assist students from needing the special education services, those early intervention services, the services that like Karen works on in her programs. Those are the programs that we need, those are the kind of services that we need to start, not only leave in the early childhood, but continue through the elementary, the middle school, and the high school, so we can do some intervention services before they need special education services.
And just one more question on that. If, in terms of comparison, how does that 19% compare either nationally or statewide or whatever would be of interest to us?
It's high. There are a number, when I look at the, some comparable districts around, a lot of the other districts have high numbers too. I don't think quite as high as the 19% we are, but there are several districts who have 14, 15, and 16%. I believe the state average is around 11 or 12%.
I think it's 12, right?
Yep.
So there might be room for improvement, just based on those numbers.
I always think there's room for improvement. And that's one of the driving factors that we're looking for these special education associate directors. And we'll learn, I'll speak a little bit more to those in some following slides.
One more question, getting to the cost of this, they have the staff number. Do you have a ratio of actual teachers and all the rest in special ed? A trend, I know what the current number is. Is there a trend, are we getting more teachers? What's proportionality between
Like number of
actual
students to
teachers and then the rest?
Yeah. This is combined, the 3-year-olds through 22, so we haven't actually.
And ratio is really hard to determine for any group, as we talked about the other night, but for special education, it's even more difficult because you have children who require one-on-one services for safety, for educational access, and it's really hard to get a true ratio, depending upon the needs of the individuals. I mean, you could get a ratio by doing the division, but is it really an accurate reading? I'm not sure. I don't know, Wendy, you might have a different opinion.
No, I would agree with that. Like you said, it's very difficult because we may have 5 students who have one-on-ones, and that would skew the ratio because then we have, teachers who have 5 students or teachers who have 10 students in their classroom, depending on the level of service need.
Is it possible that we've identified some people in special education that with further testing and further staff should not be in special education, that would change that number?
I believe, I think over-identification has been a concern of, across the United States. But in Vermont, there has been a concern. There's been talk about this at directors' meetings and special education conferences about what things we can do to really determine the need for special education services. Special education service is a specialized instructional service, and I think that's a key point. And when you go to those eligibility meetings and you really look at what things can be done within the general education environment and with specialized, need a better word, with interventions rather than specialized instruction, I think that will, have some impact on some of these numbers.
So I'm just going to give you, the 2011 percentage for SVSU was 9.45, and for the state was 5.56. I mean 15.56, sorry. And that actually dropped. Our percentage was up around 20 2 years before that. So, I'm sorry, who had a quick, Tim? Somebody had a question? I actually would like to ask, in this budget, are we, is the committee presenting those associates as a part of the budget? Meaning, was there?
Yes.
They're in the direct assessments to the districts. There's one in BSD and there's one in the other, shared amongst the other elementary districts.
So there's 2.
We're gonna look to phase Mount Anthony in a couple of years.
The original proposal was for 3, and after considerable discussion, it's at 2. We felt that or at least the administration felt that BSD really needed somebody, and Karen's, Wendy, certainly needs somebody to assist her supervision of the special education programs in the other districts, and that's why we felt it was important to have somebody else to help her.
So the discussion
But
about
it-
having an assistant superintendent for special ed is not an option?
That's budgeted in here, assistant super for sped is budgeted in here.
So
It
it
is
could be
budgeted.
a senior, what we did was drop into the budget development figure that would cover an assistant superintendent or a senior director, so that it would be whatever we ended up with the person, once the budgets are passed in the personnel
I'm glad to hear that.
committee.
And and again, on the associate directors, whatever we're calling them, I keep losing the name, but, those will be driven at the local districts, and,
The associates.
they'll determine whether they want them or don't want them, or want to add them, or delete them.
I'd just like to add one point there. One of the things that the committee felt very strongly about was that these assistants, whatever term we give them,
Associates.
will have a good deal of authority to be able to make decisions on the spot, and they'll be able to influence directly how the special education program is being monitored. Wendy, is
They will
that?
hold certification as special ed directors, so they will have that authority.
They will be able to do that.
Right.
So as far as the early childhood department is concerned, there's two primary drivers of the budget that is presented to you. And you've heard me say before that we have an increasing number of children with very complex disabilities in our program now, and more projected for next year as well. So that is one of the drivers. And then the second piece is our public pre-K efforts. We currently have 174 children enrolled. It changes actually on a daily basis, so if you look at your enrollment report, I might be one or two off. But we do want to continue the support of that project. We're starting to see some promising results. And we have to remember that we've received support over the last several years from competitive grants to the tune of over $440,000. So now we are slowly, we have been slowly transitioning to local dollars right along.
So Karen, in one of the few budget meetings that I went to, there was a presentation of actually a significant amount of money. I think it was around $200,000 to cover some of the new things. And yet on the overall slide that Rick put up, it's actually below. So I'm just wondering how one would put in the presentation that we needed $200,000 to do what we were doing going forward, but in the projected budget, it's actually below. So did it get cut? The $200,000 get cut?
Some of it was cut, and some of it was shifted to grants.
So that $200,000 is no longer an add-on in this budget?
No.
That's correct.
No, we actually are below by that $2,000 that was on the chart.
That's significant.
It is significant, and there's some pressure points that at some point we could talk about, but there are going to be some pressure points. The committee went in with our eyes wide open, and we made some decisions, and we're going to live with the decisions.
Okay.
Cross our fingers.
Maybe you'll get part of that $39 million.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so, but maybe.
So again, following what Karen was speaking about, there are some pressures driving the special education. When we were speaking about were the associate directors, and increasing their level of support, supervision, oversight to the students who have disabilities and complex needs, and the teachers who are working with these students. Along with this goes the training and support for that staff to make sure that we're making the right decisions for students. And I think that will, again, what you were saying, Mr. Sleeman, that'll go back to helping those numbers, looking at those numbers in a more efficient manner and making sure that we're providing the right kind of services to meet students' needs. And we do have a number of students with complex needs that require more services, and we need the training around those. And that's part of what those associate directors will do.
So how do I get to 176? If I can figure out how this pointer works. Maybe not. There we go, if you can see that. So our budgetary increase is 700,000. You can see just below that, lumped together some main drivers of that. If you look down, the miscellaneous net is really just a balancing number to get you back to 700,000. That is, $500, $200, $1,000, changes in budgets all throughout thousands of account numbers that add up to that. There's no one big number that jumps out to that 112. We have revenue that will offset that. That's 131 of that is roughly fund balance that's coming through to the various districts in one way, shape, or form. Again, that distribution of that revenue is a little challenging based on the new assessment streams, because I got to make sure those old tech direct assessments get the fund balance that are carried from those get placed in the right districts, so they get their money back, basically. So the net assessment increases we're looking at right now, prior to the districts, as Tim said, reviewing their direct assessment, is about $509,000. Of that 509, George, this is what you were talking about, if I can get my pointer to work here, about 300,000, the local districts will see their sped revenue come back into their budget. We won't see it in the SU budget, but you will see it in the local budgets. So the net, as I call it, although it's not on there, I had two nets on there before, it's a net cost to the districts.
Somebody probably thought it was a typo.
Probably did. Is roughly $210,000, which is, 1.7% cost to the local districts as a whole. There'll be some winners and losers, as, largely the big sped drivers. I mean, Mount Anthony's got some big expenses this year that they'll be discussing over the next couple of weeks. However, they're going to get a big portion of that revenue that comes in too to help offset that number. So it's not exactly proportionate, but as an aggregate whole, that's how we get to the 1.76.
Just, I think one thing that we also should be aware of when we start talking about what our assessments will be, and it relates directly to what our tax bill will be, that the state in its infinite wisdom has increased the base, the amount of money that they will be collecting from 94 cents up to $1.01. When you get all the way through all of that type of, with the calculations that you make, because the base tuition, the base cost for a student has gone up too, it comes out about 6.5%. Cents, I mean.
Yeah, every district's a little different, but they're right in that 6.5 cent
Right,
ballpark.
so every single district, before we do anything, is going to have a 6.5 cent increase.
I'm getting in charge.
I don't care, anybody, go ahead.
Can I just revisit my way back question? On the draft, I read page 16 as saying the expenses for the for the supervisory union are about 22 million. On the red, white, and blue thing, I see 16 million.
That's only what affects your assessments. The other money is grant money that does not affect your assessments.
So, all right, so the supervisory union, I'm not talking about, forgetting source. You're writing checks for 22 million under your name.
Probably
And
more.
it's coming from all different places.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
To further complicate it, I sometimes handle the same dollar 3 times.
Oh, I'm sure. And nickel sticks every time, don't they?
Any other questions?
Right. For a lot of the districts, what exactly, and let's take Shasberry, what exactly does 1 cent mean? 40,000, 50,000?
Every town is different.
Right.
I don't, actually,
I think it
Larry
used to
could
be
probably answer
40,
that
but
question
I'm
better
not
than I can.
positive.
I don't know what how the grand list
Yeah,
is
1
structured.
cent. It's gonna be different for every district.
Okay, well, it's not, I just didn't know if you knew the answer, because that would help me better to
No,
know.
I
It's a
don't.
total grand list. So
Right.
you just gotta look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah,
I
there
have
you go.
And nobody wants to say the wrong number because.
Right, no, and I understand that, I just wanted to get an idea, because,
Well, I
It's changed.
truly don't know, because every town is different.
right, no, I understand that.
As the districts continue to work on their own budgets.
They'll see
Right.
them. Yeah, you'll
Yeah,
See
we'll
it.
get that when we start, Shep, okay.
you'll see it.
That's fine,
And then these numbers will feed into,
yeah.
those numbers will feed into the SU
mean, a
budget.
penny used to-
Direct assessments and this number
Yeah,
will go back.
a penny used to be a lot less in Shasberry, it used to be like 15,000, or it went to 20, but I'm sure it's a lot more than that now.
You have to realize that penny, though, that penny that Shasberry raises goes to the state and it comes back to you. And all of our districts are receiving districts, so, you know, if your budget's about 5 million, I don't know, you know, you raise locally probably about 3 million of that, and the
Yeah.
other comes from the ed fund through the gas tax and lottery and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So we're a receiving district.
So, and that's a really good point, in that you hear locally a lot about the SU budget having all these, high-priced salaries in it and all these things that people can't vote on. And I think being able to break it out this way will help people understand where the costs are coming from. And I'm hoping that there'll be some kind of a small brochure or flyer that will actually identify some of the areas that relate to Act 68, the various different pieces that go into the ed funding mechanism, which is really not that easy to explain, even for many of us who've been at this for a long time. So.
Anything else?
No, I'm all set.
Tim?
You know what, if the last bullet on this sheet, if I can find the last page, we have a motion. I'm not a member of this group, but we'd like to have a motion that would read, move to approve proportional expenditures as presented. That's the proportional expenditures.
So, Tim, you're asking us to do the bottom, not do the bottom line, just the special, is there a number for that?
Proportional expenditures.
Or you want it just specifically?
Right, the proportional expenditures.
What does that mean? Excuse me.
Go back to the first slide.
That's the red part down here. If you have that list, it's that,
That increase.
it's
or
that
decrease.
increase.
Well, it's actually the decrease.
I mean, it's a decrease of
That's what they
4.6%.
gave us last night, Cindy, this thing. Cindy, this is what we got last night, it's the red. Those are the things I understand that the superintendent and the central office staff can control. All right, that's the cost, that's the real cost of running the show.
That's what we can control.
Yeah, and the rest is a special ed.
I'm in trouble.
Well, no, you don't.
Oh,
Here it is. Yeah, back. Go back.
what's that?
Yeah, that's it.
Right, I was just trying to get that total reduction,
You want to see the slide of what we're voting on? We're voting on the red, that one there. Oh, this doesn't have a number. The number for the red is $5,253,877. That's what Kim is asking for a motion on,
And that's what I'm wondering if you,
and that's what we have here.
for the record's
That's what we
sake,
have here, right?
if you want to put that $5 million number in.
I would just as soon not, in case there has to be a small adjustment. It won't vary significantly, right, Rick?
No.
So how's this gonna work in terms of, if we make this motion tonight and it gets approved, you're not actually approving a dollar amount. But on January 22nd, which is when the next SVSU meeting is, the other districts will have hopefully warned all of their budgets, so I'm
Not warn their
You'll
budgets,
see-
but
you'll
finish the
You'll
budget.
see, what
On the
we'll have
20
at that time is that we'll have that direct number,
So I just don't,
The
I
blue
mean, I'm nervous.
the blue number, right?
I'm not nervous about it for right now, but I do believe, for the record, we're going to need to vote on a dollar amount, and if you're saying that dollar amount will be voted on
On the 22nd.
on the 22nd.
You will,
it can-
you'll vote on the full budget on the 22nd,
Right.
including both proportionate and,
So what where this
And
board is
direct.
doing is we're voting on this phrase to be able to bring forward the numbers, the actual breakout in the red to each of the member districts.
right,
That's
we can
right.
start to lock those into the member district's
It'll help
budgets.
it'll help the
So
member
that you can-
districts understand where they are in terms of that particular part of their
Okay,
expenses.
so I just want to make sure that, and I wasn't at the finance meetings, and I understand what you're saying. If the people around the table understand that to be true, what was just said.
This was a recommendation
Yeah.
from the Finance
Yeah,
Committee.
the finance committee and
The free vote.
just about everybody was here, so.
Okay, so Cindy, do you understand what that means?
Of course not. My question is, on this draft, on the last page, the SVSU budget is 4.56 increase.
That green line right there.
That green line. That includes, Cindy, that includes both the red and the blue. So
What you're voting on,
is just the red. And the red represents a decrease.
It's actually a cut in the proportional assessment.
It's a cut in the proportional assessment of approximately 4.2, whatever it is, percent.
So Powell's gonna be looking at a lesser number than last year.
For that section,
this section.
for that
Well-
section. And then Pownell has made,
Not necessarily.
yeah,
well,
Here we go.
see, this is scary.
Well,
This is scary.
you had, because of the action to reshuffle, the assessments, and North Bennington not participating in some of those,
We're getting zapped.
that, your assessments aren't necessarily going down. I mean, North Bennington's will be going down a sizable amount, but the other districts are gonna have to pick that up. We had that conversation a month ago.
So the SVSU a month ago voted on the new assessment categories, and now we're at the point where we're going to vote on agreeing to the pretty set costs
Well, it's-
below the green.
Yeah, it's
Fine.
the finance office, it's the superintendent's office, it's the curriculum office, it's the HR office, it's the tech office. Those are the sections of the budget that you're approving.
Okay, so I really do want to make sure people understand, so when they go back to their board. So
And I just have one other question.
do you, is it making more sense?
Yeah, a little bit, but I just get frustrated when we come into a meeting and we're talking about the SVSU budget, okay? My question again, and I repeat it every year for the last 13 years, is the rent we're paying for central office. I don't see it in here.
It's in there.
Yeah, tell me where, please.
It would be,
You bad guys.
thank you. 35, it's 35,000.
It's the rent to BSD, and then they pay it back to us at 70%.
It's on page 3. About 10 lines from the bottom.
Okay, it's not increased.
You see it?
See it?
It's not increased.
Okay,
I haven't had that conversation with BSD, I just kind of
Yes.
assumed that I could level fund that number.
We level funded.
Cindy, is that anything else that we could help you with on that?
No.
It is complicated.
George was not, I'm trying to ask you.
I wasn't at the meeting either.
Okay, so the two that weren't at the meeting.
I'm confused, I really am. I don't know. So if you vote for this, you're voting for a 4.62 cut in the SVSU, barring any additional things that you put in your local district for sped, is that it?
Right, and Jim said it well, those areas that we can control, we reduced the budget by 4.62%. The areas in blue, which the local districts have to determine what they want for services to deliver to their special needs students, as it has always been. Those local districts tell us, yeah, I want 10 paras, I want 35 teachers, hire them, serve my kids, and send me the bill. And that's what will continue going forward.
Go ahead.
If the Bennington only approved that special assistant director, which is $38,000
Right.
over what they have now, would we see an overall decrease, you think, in the SVSU assessment?
Well, you have to realize that you have salary and benefit increases as well, and for the staff you currently have.
And healthcare.
BSD should not be seeing much of special ed increases because, I gotta be careful how I say this, but students have moved from
high school,
from your responsibility to the secondary responsibility.
So our budget will go up.
Right. Thanks a lot.
is there any way that we could, we have this, the 9th and the 16th of January where we could meet with you a little bit and get more understanding? Because I can't meet, I really have a commitment on the 23rd. I'm not going to be able to come on that. Is that when you're?
23rd.
What's the 9th and 16th? I don't know.
Is that what?
22nd. We're meeting on the 22nd.
22nd, oh, I can do that.
Yeah, the
Okay.
22nd, and your budget meeting is
Second.
the 2nd, and then you'll have subsequent.
We'll probably have one on the
Mondays.
14th as well.
So I'm going to say this again. I believe what we're doing is we're locking in what the Finance Committee has worked on for the SVSU portion of the budget, and what is left is what is added to it from the member districts. Does that make sense?
That's exactly right. And what it does, it helps each district as they're reviewing their budget to at least lock in one number, so that when they take a look at it, they know that that is going to be an expense.
So is this 4.56 artificial? It really
Yes,
isn't?
it is artificial, but it's a best guess, guessed on the recommendation that came from Karen and Wendy.
I wouldn't say it's artificial, I'd say it's fluid.
Right.
Depending on what the local districts do, that number can either go up or go down.
Does Richard Bump, do you understand?
Where are the early
Avis,
childhood
were you at the finance meeting?
Red.
Yes, she
So are you,
In the red.
is this clear to you?
Reasonably.
Okay.
Yes.
Wendy, is it clear to you?
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't have to
Breathe in
vote.
it.
Ray brought a clarification that I left out, that early childhood is also in the red. Not from a financial standpoint, from a graphical
You
standpoint.
used the wrong color. Larry, you said
no,
yes,
because it's
and
below zero.
you were
It
at
should be red.
many of the finance meetings.
He was at all of them.
So, Ray, were you at many of the finance meetings?
All of them.
All of them.
So I'm not asking if you agree or disagree, but do you understand what's being presented?
More or less.
Okay. Richard?
One question.
Sometimes less.
Where are the audit costs? Are they?
They're in blue.
Okay.
But they are very small.
Tim can't make this motion, so I'm going to ask, Larry, since you were at will you make this motion?
The motion is presented here on the back sheet.
If you wish.
Okay, and move to approve proportional expenditures as presented
In the SVSU budget.
in the SVSU budget.
Is that, I'm asking. Is
Yes.
that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So is there a second to that
Second.
motion? And that's Avis. And then is there discussion? comments. Is everybody ready to vote? All right, all in favor of this motion? 1, 2, 3. Ay, ay, ay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 1, 2, 3. Abstentions?
Just one.
1. Okay, so we have, Fran, you voted, right?
Yes, in favor.
So we have 4 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 abstention. So does the abstention count as a no?
No. No, it doesn't.
No. I'm just gonna, you know, all right. So the proportionality that is up there has been voted a yes. I'm going to ask for, Tim, you can leave, if you want to stay,
Then you can leave. You can leave now.
I just wanted to bring something up that is, Tim, it's under budget, under other, even though you're not, I mean, you're not on this board technically, but I'm following up on, where did my notes go? A couple months back, maybe 3 or 4, there was a discussion about the attorney fees, and in fact, in the spring of FY13, there was a lot of discussion about the attorney fees, and if you look on page 2, you'll see that the budget is level funded at the SVSU level from this year to next year, and other than that spike in 2013, the numbers were pretty consistent to that 70,000. So when there was discussion at that board meeting about the contract that had technically expired, I contacted Cecil Page and Fletcher and asked them what they would do for a contract going forward. And what Patty and Steve said is that I asked them for a copy of the contract from 2007, which I will post, and they said they would continue the 2007-8 costs for the next couple of years. And we do not, according to the statute, need to go out to bid on services like audit, accountants. No, we don't. It's title,
Even when it's a large amount of money like
no,
that?
it's title 16559 public bids. And what I would like to do is, after getting your, seeing where people stand, is I would like to post all of this information for the next meeting to continue at the 2007-8 costs. They said they would do it exactly as this contract was written, going forward for 2 years. And so I'm just wondering.
So it'll be retroactive to July 1 this year?
Yes. How people feel about that. I discussed it with Rick just before this meeting, because I just did this week, since it was budget time, and I wanted to sort of take care of some of the little leftover business that has come up over the last 6 or 7 months, and this would be one of them. Now, remember, negotiating for the contracts was a separate cost, and their cost for that was actually negotiated at a lesser price, so this is aside from that piece. That was a separate budgeted line item. So if this board is feeling comfortable about that, what I'll do is ask Steve to send Rick the copy of a contract, and I will post the 2007 contract as well as the Title 16 on bids for people to review. So do I want to take a consensus about whether or not to go forward? Does somebody feel they would not like me to have the contract extended at the same prices?
I feel we should have a discussion in executive session, because I have some concerns. at this point. That's just me. Everybody else can chime in here, but.
All right, well, I will consider that as well. I mean, I'll go around the table. I just think that, we are seemingly in the middle of still a number of issues legally. So, Jim?
No, one or the other, I have no,
You're fine
real
either way.
preference.
Ray?
This is extension of Stitzel's contract at the same rates for 2 years? Or just
Yeah.
one?
Well, it would be a multi-year.
Right, and as you said, they're in the midst of handling some ongoing business. I'm for it.
And we wouldn't be voting on it tonight. I just don't want to do the work if we're not going to do it. Cindy?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, Larry?
I think if Fran has questions, they should.
We'll address those.
The
I mean,
opportunity. Other than that, I'm fine with it.
Okay, Avis?
For myself, I'm fine, but I really would like to hear what Fran would like to say.
Okay.
He may change my mind.
I agree too. I'd like to hear what Fran's got to say.
All right, so, what time is it? Well, Fran,
We don't have to do it tonight.
Well, I would like to do it tonight,
Oh.
because if we're going to vote on the budget.
Well,
I'd like to-
it'll be quick if you want to go through the rest of the meeting, and then we can,
okay.
real quick.
All right, so the next item on our agenda, wherever it is, where is it?
Policies.
Policy 1000, we need a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
Is anybody here on the policy committee? Avis, no?
No.
Lori, this is to adopt, so I'm assuming any changes that were made came through.
Yeah.
So, can I have a motion to adopt policy 1000?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adopting policy 1000? It's unanimous. Do I have a motion to accept the November treasurer's report?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Jim?
Oh, yeah.
It's unanimous. I'm going to skip down to C and then we'll go back up to B. Does anybody have any questions on the budget status report that was posted on the web?
I have one comment,
Yeah.
and I handed Rick a letter, a note about it, but everybody in Pownell objects to the type size of each financial document. We can't read it.
Oh, on the one that's posted?
Well, the one that was printed out, the
budget
the
status?
budget status report is 8-point type, and I've asked Rick to change it to 12.
So,
It doesn't mean anything, it's
I know, when you look at it on the computer, you can make it bigger or smaller,
But you lose the ordered array aspect of it, because you lose the whole picture.
But I think if it went to bigger type point, it would expand to an 8.5 by 14, right?
Yeah, I'll look into it, I don't.
Okay.
We're going to
It's not a
print
big
you a
issue.
large print size. You know those books that say large
No.
print?
I've explained to Rick how to fix it.
All right.
Analysis
So,
of how
we're good
how you
with
can
that?
save the space that he's asking for.
Frank, the proposal to provide internet service?
Yes. We put out to bid, we put an RFP out for internet service, excuse me, to 9 vendors. There's certain requirements that we have to, that they have to meet for us to maintain our rating compliance. And we got 4 proposals back. You should have that in your packet, I believe. We decided to offer this to Sovereign Communications. It came in at a substantially lower rate. Of the 4 people who responded to the RFP, 3 gave us reasonably complete responses. 1 didn't really answer all the questions. But Sovereign came in with the lowest price by far, and with more service than we actually had requested. And we'd like to offer them the contract.
So I actually don't really have a question on the actual proposal, but I brought this up at MAU, and I brought this up before, I shared it with Rick yesterday, is that it might be helpful if we have a consistent kind of template. I mean, most of the information is here, but it would be helpful if the action, if the comment on "we," I'm assuming the "we" is you?
I guess the "we" is me.
We.
Or the "we" is, I don't know who the "we" is. I have.
You're an English teacher, Frank.
I had taken well, I know who the "we" is, but I don't know who the "we" is. Your staff.
So I'm just saying that as we go forward, and this is kind of those little things that, over time I think that the form, and I'm going to hand this back to you, what I handed out at MAU, it's basically a recommended action sheet, and this is great, except that it would be, I just have to laugh at who the "we" are.
Okay, well, just, I don't know, I don't want to say in my defense, but I took an RFP for another service, it was actually for a bus service, and I plugged in the information that was relevant, so I was using a template, so to speak.
Okay.
And the "we" was
So the
probably
tech
there.
department, or Frank and Ann, because I saw that the information went to Ann, so I'm not going to belabor the point, I just,
So how-
a date and who the "we" are would be helpful, so
How would that read in the future then?
I'm going to just share it with you. Do we have a motion on the floor to accept this? No?
So moved.
That's Larry and...
Second.
And Cindy? Oh, thank you for turning off the fans, whoever that was. Is there any questions for Frank?
Do we know how much it is?
Do we know how much it is?
Yes,
78,000.
78,000.
So, all in favor of the bid to Sovereign Communications? Raise your hand. It's unanimous. And then the next item is the consent agenda. I have a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Fran and Cindy, any questions? The warrants are actually not in here because we're off, because we'll see them at the next meeting.
Hey, I got one.
These warrants.
Yeah.
Oh, those are old, yeah. Those
Oh,
are,
these are the ones from the last off-season for Thanksgiving.
Oh,
Spent an hour and a half reading it. I did.
Officiating basketball.
With notes.
Oh, so we're gonna
Okay.
approve them, but I'm just saying, they were
just
last
had some
month.
questions, I don't anymore. Jeez. Okay.
All in-
Sean Marie.
Yes. Ray?
I know there aren't job descriptions in this consent agenda.
There are?
Yes.
There aren't, are there?
No.
Could the parts of, this is a format for the consent agenda, could we make sure that the parts of the format that are not actually in this consent agenda have some designation, so looking at this at a glance, you know exactly what we're voting on?
so none beside job description?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Well, if we all read our
You
packets.
supplied the word, I
we would
was
know.
figuring, I had
Oh,
to figure
you know
that out.
what? I'm sorry. We have a revised
That was
consent
a big ass
agenda.
packet.
So is there a,
This is a paraprofessional for the middle school being added.
you know what, so really what we're doing is the motion on the floor, can somebody amend it to add an intensive needs paraprofessional, which is coming around. So we're adding one to it, so can you just review that, and whoever made the motion, can you add that to it?
I think Fran made the motion.
Fran?
I'll add the amended consent agenda, the para.
I'll second it.
All right, that's the only change. All in favor? Or, I'm sorry, were there any other questions? All in favor? It's unanimous. I am, okay, Catherine? The next legislative
The
breakfast?
next legislative breakfast is January 20th. And I will be working with the directors, with Rick and others, if any of you are interested in letting me know specific topic areas that you would like to alert the legislators to for this session. If you can email me, and I'll send you out a reminder. I'm trying to compile a list to send to them before the session opens on January.
Thank you, Catherine.
What time,
What time is that normally?
what time does it start?
January, 7:45 on the 20th at the SVSU office.
Okay, I can come for part of it.
I'm going to forego the format conversation, and
Could you describe what that conversation was going to be about?
the format conversation?
Yes, the meta part of it. You're describing what you would have talked about, so it's a meta
So,
presentation.
how about if I just, can you pass this down to Grant? It would be a template, like I was talking about with Frank, that would give the board the recommendation, that goes to Rick, the recommendation that the individual or the department is making, the actual motion that you want the board to approve.
I see where this is going.
It would give the cost implications, if any, and it would give the people who are at the meeting that would be available to talk about it. So if let's use tonight as an example for the SVSU budget, it would be a recommendation from the finance committee. It would be what the recommendation was. It would have that cost implication maybe explained about the 4.5, 6. So you can look at the format, and so we can do that at a later time.
$4 million.
Are there any other, okay, before we end, under Chair's report, I want to wish everybody a happy and safe holiday. We will be back in 2014. It's hard to believe. I'm really not that old, right?
No.
On the 22nd, right? You said
We will be back here on the 22nd. All the other boards will meet before then, hopefully. And I want to ask Lori, would you still like 5 minutes in executive session?
I think I will rely on Ms. McClure's prompt attention to the matter and let it rest for one meeting.
So we may see you on the, well, we will.
You may hear me before then.
All right, thank you, Lori, and we'll go into executive session for contracts for 5 minutes, and there'll be no action.
Can I just make a quick, I'm sorry, I will make sure that I know that the handout was small, I'll make sure that it's posted on the web, and I'll make sure it gets emailed to everybody, so you can see it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
He had a question.
Thank
Well,
you.
that's what I want.
Oh, okay. You got it. The red and the blue line.
Did we make a motion to adjourn?
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Executive session.
Executive session.
A motion to move into executive session.
All in favor?
Aye.